Testing. Okay, 6:02. We're about to get started. I'm going to let Caroline do most of this, but I did want to just say on behalf of City of Smithville, welcome and thank you all for being here. And thanks to anyone who's online, but especially y'all who made it physically here today. We really appreciate you all that are here and interested in land use. And so I'm going to go ahead and pass it over.
Thank y'all for coming tonight. I want to introduce our guest speakers tonight, our expert speakers, Travis Baird and Leighton Carr. We met them at the TML conference last month, and we've asked them to come this evening to help us with our discussion on land use tonight. Before we go over this, get started, I'm going to go over the ground rules again. The moderators will guide the discussion, but they will remain neutral. Everyone is encouraged to participate. No one dominates. The discussion stays focused on the issue at hand, which is land use tonight. Maintain an atmosphere for discussion and analysis of our options. This is a discussion, it's not a debate. Listening is as important as talking, so please silence your cell phones. And we will work together toward making a decision tonight. So with that said, Travis, want to introduce yourself?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you all very much for the chance to be here. Can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. All right. My name is Travis Baird. I am the Assistant Planning Director for Current Planning for the City of Georgetown, just north of Round Rock, north of Austin. I have been in that role for about 3 years. Prior to that, I was the city's real estate manager, and I was in that role for 5 years. My background originally is in right-of-way acquisition and condemnation. So I started for a consulting and engineering firm working for groups like TxDOT, counties and cities in acquiring rights of way for infrastructure, for development, or for roadway extensions. And I was lucky enough to get to go to work 7 minutes from my house in Georgetown. And then I was lucky enough to jump over to the planning group in 2022 at a time when we experienced the most growth that we had ever seen, which was saying something for that city because we had seen a lot of growth. And at that point, we were processing about, I think, 2,500 applications a year for development. In my time at Georgetown, we've grown from about 50 some odd thousand people to around 100,000 people. So it's changed as a community. So, but thank you all very much for the opportunity to come and speak with you.
Leighton? Leighton Carr.
Yeah, interesting to hear Travis's CV there, and I like the way that he approached that. Currently, I'm with the City of Round Rock. I'm the Assistant Director of Public Works, and that's kind of like a recent title. And I've come there from floodplain administrator there in the Utilities Department. And before that, I spent about 12 years in the Planning Department, land development, permitting subdivision and site plan development. And prior to that, I was working for a consulting firm that did land development out of school. In school, I studied water resources, and I've kind of come back full circle now, and that's kind of what we're focused on. But we're heavily involved back with the old group that I came from, came to the Public Works Department from, which would, is in land development. So it all ties together, and it's just all real interesting conversation to me. And you guys are forward thinking, and it's good you're thinking about this right now. So look forward to it.
So, yeah, and thank you both. We really appreciate you both being here. This is an important topic, and y'all are been well experienced in what to help us out with it. I did want to also introduce Tim Jenkins from Langford. So Langford and Associates is the group that's working with us on our comprehensive plan, and so he's participating now. I'm waiting to loop in a couple of colleagues on Zoom, and I'll just if they do loop in at a convenient time, I'll introduce them. Otherwise, my apologies to them. But yeah, but he's here today. And again, thank you all for being here. And that's yeah. Thank you.
We're going to do the same thing tonight that we did last week. We want to ask you, what does land use mean to you? So if we kind of go around the room, if everybody can kind of give us a quick little. Oh, I can walk.
No, okay. No.
Hi. Is it on? Land use, or more specifically zoning categories, are a tool that a governmental authority has to encourage or limit what it does and does not want in particular areas of town.
I would just say it's the best use of the land to benefit all the citizens and maybe the government.
Well, that was kind of my question. What exactly is land use? But Monica pretty much nailed it, sounds like.
Well, land use to me is divided into different categories: residential, commercial, and manufacturing, and so forth. And so, of course, we have to have some for waste management, as well as having some green space, because we have to keep places for the animals and the birds to thrive also when you plan about land use. So it involves all of those different categories.
Basically, summed up. Yeah. Okay. She said, Monica said exactly what she was going to say, just so it's clear. We just had, because it's recording and people don't hear if you're not. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so in order for people in Zoom land and on YouTube to hear us, you really have to speak so you can hear yourself talk on the speakers. If you don't hear yourself talk on the speakers, then they can't hear you. So trying to fix that.
I agree. I like what Monica said. I'm not sure if this is what does land use mean to you or if it's what's important, but I think that it directs the flow of traffic and the future use of how the city is going to operate and look as well.
Good evening to all. But for me, land use, especially is for people in housing. It's so hard to try to find some place to move to. And I know y'all know that all the stuff has skyrocketed. So it is really beneficial if Smithville could do more housing stuff and job stuff, because you have to leave from here to go to Austin or wherever to really work. So more power to y'all.
Hi, land use to me is just a systematic approach for community to achieve its vision in growth, but as well as current city limits, like with infill development and opportunities like that. Land use also kind of guides where your future infrastructure needs to go to support that vision of the cities.
Okay, does anybody else have anything else that they want to add? Okay, nobody else has anything they want to add? Okay. All right, we're going to get started then with the 3 questions. The first one is, we want to balance our land use for residential, commercial use, and mixed-use development in the face of anticipated rapid growth. Our ETJ only goes so far. What do you recommend?
I was really worried that y'all were going to throw us some softball question at the beginning, so I'm glad you didn't. Let's get interesting right off the bat. That's I think that's something every community wants, and it certainly is a real struggle. We are asking ourselves the same thing in Georgetown all of the time. We actually just did a comprehensive plan update last year. We did, I think, 9 master plan updates last year. I'm looking forward to not doing that again for a while, and I wasn't even that deeply involved. But the crux of all that was, where do we want these things to be and how do we want them to balance out? I think the first thing that I would recommend is, and some of this will probably feel a little vague, but what do you want your community to be? What do you want it to look like? And what do you want? What are you okay with? In all of these decisions that you're going to make, there will be unintended consequences, trade-offs, things that you accept, and things that you want. And I think what I notice the most, I mean, I have a unique position. I plan in the community in which I live, so I'm very lucky. It also means that I get to be responsible for all the things that frustrate me the most. So I'm also very lucky, I suppose. But where I look and I see, I wish that looked different. But sometimes I wish that looked different, and I wish we'd done something about it. And sometimes I wish that looked different. But I'm okay because I know why it didn't, and I know where we got otherwise. So as an example, you want more retail as a community, and you're next to a major state highway. And what do you want that retail to look like versus what do you want that retail to be versus when do you want that retail to arrive? And all of those are balancing acts, because the easier and the less expensive it is for that retail to locate there, perhaps the faster it will do it, but perhaps the lower quality that it will be, right? So if you want a really nice outdoor multi-acre shopping center, that takes a lot more investment from the development community. It takes a lot more investment from the city, and it's not just dollars. It's time, it's sweat, it's heartache, it's frustration, and it comes together in that product. This is going to be like anything else that you've experienced in life. The more you put in, hopefully the more that you get out, and there's risk. But I think I'll pause there for a second and just say, what do you want this community to look like if it were to develop out in the way you're planning now?
Yeah, I think that's the question to ask. Like, what do you want your community to look like in the future? So this is that opportunity where you start thinking about that and put it down on paper, and you know, it doesn't have to be the final. It's a living document, right? It's land use, and then until you hard program things, it's the druthers. It's how the people here today envision it, and it gives it a guiding path to developing sort of in your vision, right? The other important component of that is the planning tool that it is. And so if you know kind of what you want, and then you start thinking of, okay, how's everything then going to connect to that? How's that going to get served with utilities? And you'll probably hear me go into utilities a bit, but water, wastewater, and your roads how do you get all those to these particular locations? And you might find that, you know, if something is zoned a particular way that it's not very beneficial from a utility perspective, that it might be difficult to get it there, or a road or whatever. And, you know, that configuration might, might redefine to move things around. So anyway, it's a great planning tool. So you go through those thought processes, and once you have them in place, and and you've got a master plan for your utilities, for your roads, then you can start developing out that way to get things ready as there are resources you can get set up. So when that development comes that everybody wants, or not everybody's going to want it, but if the majority of them do, then you're ready, right? You become suddenly a very attractive community for them, because you've got the water right there, and you've got the wastewater within reach, and all that. And something that we were talking about earlier was uh, it also affords the opportunity to start thinking about housing, right? So if you're going to have a manufacturer come to town, who's going to work there, right? And if nobody can afford to live in town, and you're going to have to draw people from different counties, and Fayette and Lavaca, or they're going to have to come that far to come work in your facility. That's not as attractive to a somebody doing a development, certainly a manufacturer. So anyway, it's all part of the resource that you need to think about, and all that comes with how you plan the land uses and how you envision it today.
All right, the second question is actually a two-part question. Given your experience with rapid growth, what should Smithville be focused on in order of priorities? How can we learn from the things that you did well and the things that you wish you would have thought about ahead of time?
I think both of us have plenty of experience with rapid growth, and I know I certainly have plenty of opinions that I can share with you tonight. And lucky for you, I will. I don't know that I think there's a lot of things Georgetown did well. I'm not quite so sure how many things I did well yet, but I know there's a lot of lessons that I learned. When I started at Georgetown, and even though it was not in planning, it wasn't doing this exercise right here, it was very much in development. My job was to go out and was to get easements and land for parks, for roads, for wastewater lines, for water lines. When I showed up, there was one of me. And the city of Georgetown had 40 square miles of city limits, about 61 square miles of ETJ, and 461 square miles of water service area. To put that in perspective, for those of y'all that know Williamson County, from where Georgetown is all the way to Burnett and all the way up to Harker Heights was our water service area. So about half of the county almost. I don't know that they told me that in the interview. But day one, that got real interesting. For the 5 years that I was in there, we averaged about 110 transactions a year recorded. And that was a lot to run through one person. That also didn't capture a lot of the work that we were doing on project planning, negotiation, and condemnation that can take multiple years. And so we saw what it meant to speed up, and every year was faster, and every year was faster. I'd say that lesson that I learned there did me well when I moved to planning. And when I moved to planning in 2022, we lost about half of our staff. I moved in 2021, and in 2022, we lost half of our staff, and we spiked to the busiest we'd ever been. And so first lesson is have your process in place. You need to know what your organization can do as a city. And you need to know what things are absolutely critical, mission critical, what things are great to have, and what things are those things that we do when it's sunny outside and it's quiet, right? When development comes, it doesn't always come in a huge torrential pour, but it can. And you can go and you can double your population in no time. And in order to do that, what you want to do is you want to make sure that at the end of that process, you have functional networks. That this plan that you're putting together got followed to the best degree possible. And you can have the best plan on paper, and if your execution isn't good, the plan won't happen, and then the work that you did won't happen, and then it'll have knock-on effects, including now you have land uses where you didn't want them. It doesn't look like you thought it would be. You didn't get the housing you thought. Your infrastructure networks may be in trouble because the wrong things are in the wrong places for the size pipes that you had. I'd say what Georgetown did well is Georgetown was ready for some of that. We certainly weren't ready for a lot of the growth that came our way. I don't think that we ever could have been. There were some dynamics in 2020 that we all saw that just changed the way development happened in Texas, let alone anywhere else. But Georgetown for a long time had invested in process. Georgetown for a long time had invested in people. And Georgetown for a long time had invested in a culture of we follow our plan and this is important to us. And when we make decisions, the first place we look is our plan.
Yeah, great points. So yeah, rapid growth, and it comes on you in a hurry. When you become a hotspot, it's already rolling, right? And so the lag it's a wave that's just sort of like in action. So it's good to sort of get your ducks in a row now and think about these things that you want, things that we've learned. Look to other communities. What I would recommend is look to other communities that you want to be, not another Smithville in its current state, but what you envision. You look at that, you have your land use map, you've sort of gone through this and okay, well, we kind of want to look like this other town. And and look to them for the standards that they have. So they've been through the growing pains that you'll be rolling into. So what are the development standards that they have in place? And not like you're going to go throw them all in, because if you get all their stuff and put that in place and the fee scales and all that sort of thing, yeah, you're not there yet, and they're not going to want to pay it, and you don't need it just yet. But you want to be able to know where you're going with it so that you can grow into that. So you set up your infrastructure, so to speak, organizationally, what do you need to look like? Staffing, you're going to have staffing needs, and you want to think about that other community, and then as where you're going, and then their processes. So they'll have processes in place that again, they've been through the growth and everything. And so if you have those processes set up, then you're going to fall into them a whole lot more easily. As an example, our utility building, we're going into the phase 2. We've done the phase 1, and it's a very nice building, and there's lots of space in there, and we've grown into it. So it looked like a whole lot of empty space when we started, but when we were envisioning how we wanted to do this facility for Public Works, it was we looked to a community that was larger than we were. We looked to not somebody who was 100,000, but somebody who was 250,000. And what does their facility look like? And so that's what we got, right? So we went and we found, a few years later, we're already like, we've got that filled up. And so we're going into phase 2, and we need to think like that again. So anyway, I'd say the same for anything that you're looking to do along these lines of fast growth. Another thing is there are going to be costs to growing, and you have to be, I guess you have to have metrics and know what it costs in other communities and why it costs that, because there's a reason why it costs an impact fee for somebody to go in and pay their way. A developer comes into town and they're going to create this larger demand on the wastewater, water, and roads. Well, they need to pay their way so that the local tax base isn't paying for it, right? So let those who are coming to town pay for what they're bringing, and be willing to ask for it. They pay it out everywhere else, so know your market, and you can ask for those things. And then there are offsets that you could ask for as well. There's a value in the removed friction in process. So somebody wants to come to town, they're willing to open their pocketbook and pay for that wastewater, water, and road impact fee in exchange for if your development process is easy, right? If your people are easy to work with, if you're thinking about, if you talk in terms of what they can do with their property instead of things they can't do, you know, if you bring the right attitude, you can offer a value to somebody coming, and that's worth money to them. So I'd say in the face of rapid growth, those are all things to be thinking about in advance.
Okay, if y'all can look on your pieces of paper there, we did give y'all a definition sheet. So I'm asking the panelists now, what is your experience with PIDs, MUDs, PDDs, and do you recommend these options for Smithville?
I do not have any, well, I say no experience with PDDs. I think PDD for y'all is what we call a PUD. It's a type of planned unit development, right? And thank you. And so I have plenty of experience with those. I think we have about 90 or so in Georgetown. This is maybe 87 more than I wanted, but they are certainly a useful tool. MUDs, I have worked on MUDs. I have worked on the periphery of PIDs. So, right, PIDs and MUDs are financing sort of vehicles for development, and the PDD, the PUD, is more of a form and function sort of document or zoning. It's where the rest of your zoning categories don't work, but this project's something special, and you got to make special zoning for it. I don't know if these things are right for Smithville. I wouldn't presume to say that they are because I don't know your community well enough. I wouldn't presume to say that they aren't either. None of those three are silver bullets to problems. They are all potential solutions and also potential risk. With a MUD, just the easiest one, right? A MUD, you create a district, it has taxing authority. You may do just utility or you may do road powers. So the idea there is that that MUD can also tax in order to offset the cost of the infrastructure extended. And that means for us, we have in-city MUDs and out-of-city MUDs. For MUDs that are in city, those folks are paying city taxes. They're also paying a MUD tax on top of the city tax. What it does for the city is that it allows for that infrastructure to be extended without the cost of that infrastructure being borne by current residents. It's borne by the then residents of that district. But those folks are certainly paying a greater share, right, in order to pay for that stuff long term. And so the likelihood is they will expect more. The PID delivers more. It delivers a higher standard in public infrastructure and public improvements. And you'll see better parks and different streetscapes. And we have two PIDs that I can think of off the top of my head in Georgetown. One is Georgetown Village, if you want to go look at it. It was done in the 90s and the 2000s. And then we have West Haven. And so each of those has the potential. Each of those is popular with segments of the development community that are comfortable with it. They're comfortable with what they have seen in the past. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that every MUD, every PID, and every PUD is the same. And that's where you need to be very careful when you use it, of making sure that you're familiar with the concept, that you're ready to enter into those discussions and those negotiations, and you have a really firm footing of what you want on the outside of it. Because you're going to be working with folks who do it quite often. And so you don't want to go into it blind, for sure.
Yes, good. So my experience with PIDs, there was one, it was Travis will be familiar with this, A.W. Grimes, that an arterial that runs north and south to serve State Highway 45 up to join Gaddis School Road. And there are a bunch of properties that it went through the middle of. And all those property owners then, so the city fronted the money to build that, and then the property owners would then pay in as development would tie on to it. And so it was a lot of accounting. I came in sort of in the middle or toward the end of that PID, but there was always that extra thing to keep up with. There was the change of the value of the investment. Were you getting the right amount? It always seemed like we had to check in with finance, like, what's the buy-in on the PID today? And it almost seemed like, like financial stock market or something. And so anyway, I just remember a lot of record keeping, a lot of extra work to do the developments in those areas. And later on, there was an area right in the corner of State Highway 45 and I-35, and there was a redevelopment there in the north and west corner of that, and they turned it into a shopping strip and everything. And there needed to be these, what they were turning it into required wastewater upgrades. And so the developer's like, how can we pay for this? We can't pay it all at once. This is a large amount and everything. And so I got with the city attorney and the utility director, and I said, hey, we're interested in setting up a pit. And no. So, I mean, it came fast. And I was like, okay, well, I guess we won't do that. So apparently there's a whole lot of expertise that goes into it, a whole lot of record keeping, and it lasts for years. So if you can avoid a pit, if there's another way to do that, that be advised, or, consult somebody who really knows what they're doing about it. But yeah, apparently it was a lot of work. Yeah. MUDs, it's just been my experience. If you're not out there with your utility and ready to serve them when they're ready to develop, they're going to form themselves, and then you've got no say in it. And so we've got several MUDs around Round Rock that will never become part of our utility just because the way that they financed it, it never becomes a responsible option with public funds. It's not going to be profitable. Not profitable. That's too high on it, right? So we'd constantly be servicing debt. So it's best if there's a MUD that the city's able to go in agreement on it. But if you're there to serve with your utility, if you've been thinking ahead and planning this out, and your utility's getting into within reach of a developer grabbing it and doing the rest of the extension, that's much more advantageous. You just have one utility and it becomes streamlined. And then PDDs, again, I'm not familiar by that name, but PUDs is probably what we're most familiar with, but that's a planned unit development. It's on the definition sheet as well, and I didn't do the compare and contrast there, but the PUDs, we've got over 100 of them in Round Rock, and it's kind of tiring that we keep doing a PUD, right? We've got zoning. Why are we doing another PUD? But it does allow for, and what a PUD is it is within a zoning category. It allows certain things that zoning would not allow in exchange for the developer bringing something higher and above the use that is ordinarily required by the PUD. So there's kind of like a win-win in that. And so anyway, we've gone into a lot of them, and it's made a lot of things happen. So yeah, as much of a anomaly as it seems, it did create some opportunities, and we benefit from them. So anyway, yeah. Yeah, so PUDs, I would probably recommend them as you need them, but certainly think about your zoning and land use categories first, and PUDs as you need them. But as far as MUDs and PIDs, if you can avoid them, find another way of working those.
With the new legislation about disannexing from ETJs, I haven't seen it, and none of our communities have had it. Wimberley's had 20 parcels disannexed in the last year. I don't know about Smithville. I don't think we have anything here yet. My concern is that those guys are going to reinvent the mud landslide that we had back in the 90s when we did all the MUDs in Austin, did all those. Have you had to deal with an ETJ disannexation? And if you have, did they already have some type of development tool in mind like that?
So we haven't had the experience of an ETJ de-annexing or breaking off or. Yeah, yeah. To the north and east, we've got ETJ out there, but you're right. We're getting to the point where we're starting to reach all those areas, right? Where you expand out into the ETJ and incorporate the city limits, expand the city limits out to them, and we're kind of out there in a lot of areas. We still have some frontier, but not nearly like what we used to have. But we haven't had anybody try to get out of the ETJ yet. But as far as utilities, somebody can be outside of your ETJ, but be within your covenant of convenience necessity, that your CCN, and there's a CCN for water and a CCN for wastewater, and a CCN for a utility means that you have the right to serve, a sole right to serve that utility in that area, right? Somebody else can't extend into that area legally with their utility. That still exists, but you want to keep that, whatever ETJ you have, and especially if it's limited, right? Because that's where you can expand the city limits into and where your tax base is going to be. So, yeah, that's we haven't experienced it yet, but yeah, we want to hang on to what we've got.
We have experienced quite a bit. We have quite a bit more ETJ in, I'd say, 3 of our directions. And so I don't know the metrics, but I'd say it is a noticeable amount. And yes, I think a lot of the properties that we're seeing pull out right now are properties that probably can develop without some of our utilities. We don't have a wastewater CCM. We do have a water CCM, but not wastewater. So in order to get wastewater, the city of Georgetown, you have to come into the city limits generally. And so I think a lot of what we're seeing is folks who can get by without wastewater. They can operate on septic. And so they're just trying to remove themselves from the rest of our regulatory authority, because we do have some development authority in the ETJ. We have seen some developments, though, that are leaving and are looking to structure MUDs and do that type of development. And so I would agree. I think the risk there is that you will have the opportunity for developments to come in, and the state's goal through TCEQ is regionalization of wastewater. It's to really kind of focus in those efforts and gain the economy of scales that you see, and also make sure that you get as much expertise on managing those assets as possible. The smaller you go with those plants and the more fractured it becomes, the bigger the problem. And so I think we're going to see that. I wanted to say one thing real quick on PIDs, MUDs, and PUDs. On PIDs and MUDs, one thing that I would say was a lot of foresight on the behalf of the city of Georgetown, specifically on former assistant city manager that we had named Wayne Reed, who's now a city manager in his own right. Was he spearheaded the effort for a special districts policy. And so we adopted a policy on how you structure PIDs and MUDs, why you do it, what the city hopes to gain. And so it's an ordinance that's adopted, but it's a guiding sort of element that not only do we as staff have, and it really helps us understand what the city wants us to do day to day in working on those, but we can hand it to the development community. And I'm sure that you experience this. The development community comes in and they say, well, what does Smithville want? And it can be hard for any organization to speak with one voice. When you have that policy, you have the opportunity at the moment to say, we've decided this is what we want. And they can read it. And to Mr. Carr's point earlier, the easier you can make that process and the more certainty you can give them in dealing with you, the more they're going to like it, even if there may be elements of that policy they're not too keen on.
And Jill, this is probably for you, but where does our ETJ reach out to?
Okay, on your table, you have at least one map. And on the other side of that map,
Right, you'll see the map that shows the ETJ. Yeah. Right, half mile beyond the city limits.
North, south, east, and west?
So you see how that red line is? So that's, it just, yeah, yeah,
Circle.
yes,
Okay.
yeah, basically.
Oh.
For the experts, if, I don't know if it's hindsight's 2020 or what recommendations you might have for us, we're pretty much on the precipice of we're next in line. And so I'm hearing you say the more you can get ahead of the developers coming in with the PIDs and PUDs and MUDs, the more you can be able to provide infrastructure and or particularly water, wastewater management, wastewater treatment. What mechanisms did you use or would you use to try and get ahead of that curve so you can provide those types of utilities? It's kind of a loaded question, but.
I love loaded questions. You know where you got to go. I think the first thing I would tell you to do is what you're doing right now is this comprehensive plan. And that is, this is going to inform so much of everything else that you need to do. Because if you're looking at it, you know, when I look at your zoning map and I look at it, by the way, when I looked at your zoning map last week to kind of prepare for this, I do got to say, I liked one of your zoning categories very specifically. I knew exactly what it was, the highway commercial. Went to one of our planners. I was like, this is great. Look at that. Like, you know exactly what you need. But I look at it and I see all of the empty space, which is your ETJ, the areas that aren't zoned yet. And I start filling it in with what I think would go there, right? So you look at the areas where you're zoning industrial. And I would say, well, whatever future land use you're going to look at for residential, you're probably not going to put right next to your industrial. And so that's going to start telling you what kind of roadway infrastructure you need and what kind of water infrastructure you need and what kind of wastewater infrastructure you need. So this first thing that you're doing here, that's the first thing that I would recommend that you do. After that, there are sort of those knock-on plans that are going to come along, like infrastructure plans. I think we talked about, you know, Leighton mentioned impact fees. And I think he made a really solid point that I would say, look at the communities that you want to be or that you feel you're growing towards, not necessarily geographically, but in character. You know, in Georgetown, we do that same thing. And we don't just look at the communities next door. We look at communities across the state. Our council earlier this year, last year, kind of went on a tour to several cities. They went up to places around Dallas, like McKinney. And I would say, look at those communities, look at the tools that they have put in place and say, what can we use there?
So when you decide what you want to be and what you want to do, how do you finance what needs to be done? That was the loaded part.
That's some great.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so you want to try to think of the order I want to say this. I'll start with a little anecdote. This is pretty recent. Well, the build up to it isn't so recent, but when I started in the city of Round Rock in 2009, we had these manuals and paper copies. It's all digital now. It's PDF, so it sounds weird to say this, but I'd have this manual and it said construction development standards for city of Round Rock and 2005. So we'd adopted these standards in 2005 that we had taken from another city, the city of Austin, and I think their stuff was dated earlier than that, right? And so anyway, for years, somebody didn't want to detain stormwater on their site. They could release it because we supposedly had this regional stormwater prevention, RSMP, management plan. There you go. I say RSMP so often, I forget what it stands for. But anyway, there's this this program to, we'll build regional detention and public spaces. So all this water comes down and we catch it, and you don't have to build these expensive detention ponds on your property and so forth and so on. And to do it, it's $800 an acre for residential. It's $1,600 an acre for, I think multifamily, and $2,400 an acre for commercial and non-residential. If you try to think what you can do for $2,400 an acre, think about the things you can do around your house for $2,400 an acre. I don't think I could get my lawn sodded for $2,400 and an acre. And of course, it said it in there. So of course they could do it if they just showed, if they proved to me that they could pass these flows and, there's no adverse impact downstream. So we've been collecting it. And now I'm the manager of the regional partnership for our wastewater treatment plant. So we share a regional wastewater treatment plant with the cities of Leander, Cedar Park, and part of the city of Austin. So down at it, your wastewater treatment plant's always going to be your lowest elevation, right? Because everything flows down to it, then you pump it up and into the process. So we're down in the floodplain, and we've now got floodplain starting to encroach this plant. So I need to find a way to get the floodplain off this plant and not onto the people on the other side of the bank. And so I've got this flood problem that I need to deal with. And so one day somebody wanted to come into the city for $2,400. I mean, wanted to pass their flows for $2,400 an acre. And I looked downstream, like, not to my plant, you're not. It's like suddenly I had like this stake in it. So I had gone from the regulation, position of the planning department to now I'm responsible for this stuff. I'm over in the public works department. So I'm like, I've got a problem, and I'm trying to get a flood study just done by an engineer for $93,000. So why am I letting this go at $2,400 an acre? So I thought, well, we're not going to pass flows down because we know we got a problem downstream. So nobody's gonna be able to show me with their math that I don't have a problem, because FEMA shows me I do have a problem. And so I looked to another development that was happening right by the office, and I reached out to the guy managing that project, and I said, Addison, how much is it costing you to do your detention pond over there? He sends me a number, and I'm like, my God, that is $70,000 an acre. And I'm wondering, what? So there was like a real number to this to me now. And so I was like, we need to be collecting something much more. And so we still need to responsibly address an ordinance and a fee and all that sort of thing to come up with it. But somebody really, really, really wanted to, we can't detain on our site. It's just not possible. And I agreed with them. I'm like, yeah, there's no way you're going to fit all this in there without it being underground. And even underground detention doesn't have the elevations where you can pass this. So I said, well, let me see what I can do. And so I got with one of my engineers and I said, Catalina, I need you to see what it would really cost. And so she ran through this calculus. She checked it against the city of Austin's, and she's like, okay, well, here's the number. And so I went, okay, guys, here's the number. And it was like, $170,000. And they didn't even flinch. They're like, okay, well, let us run that by management and see. So if you know what you're asking for, go ahead and ask for it. If you need to negotiate back, but you want to be fair, and, it needs to be a win-win. And yeah, it needs to be a win for Smithville too, right? So you can't just let that go. So that's one way to pay for it, and don't be afraid to ask for it. You're not being greedy. You're just paying for things so that the citizens and the tax base that are currently here aren't paying for it. It's just responsible development. But the other thing is, if you know your layout, as we talked about, where you now know your utility master plan, you now know your road master plan. So the roads that you need to bring at certain levels of development in your city. Those, you then have like a solid map. And then you look to things like the Texas Water Development Board, who will have programs and grants for cities who have a developed plan And, they're going to be serving, certain, they sort of name the parameters and you're like, oh, I fit in that category. And then you apply for a grant and then anyway, you can get that money then and then you start extending start realizing that plan that you have, that master plan. So there's that. The Water Development Board will help with that and flood control, um, wastewater. So anyway,
So ultimately, we end up in part of the process, and Tim, you and I were both off microphone when we said that word, the capital improvement plan. Can y'all describe kind of what that entails?
yeah, that master plan of utilities.
Plan will be one of the elements of the plan is a capital improvement plan.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, you want to develop that, capital improvement plan. And as you get the money, you want to develop it and
Turn it into a program, have money.
that's right.
Well, that's what Langford does. We go and get grants. That's what Langford does. We go and get grants.
So,
But that and, local bond packages. Bond package. Don't quote me.
well, and another way you can do that though is somebody wants to develop, they want to tie onto your system and you come up with a metric of how much we call them living unit equivalents, where we have a certain, like one single family house on a 5/8 inch meter is one living unit equivalent. And that's approximately 2.5 people or whatever, however you split a person. And that one LUE on that. And as you get a larger size meter, you have more LUEs. So somebody wants to come to town and they want a, 2-inch meter. Well, that 2 inches is about 8 LUEs. And then you multiply that times, well, let me back up, times a rate. Okay. And that rate comes from all the costs it costs you to provide capacity to serve LUEs, right? And then you split it up. And then for one LUE, it's going to cost, let's say, $7,000 of water and wastewater. It's going to be $7,000 impact to your community for each one of those LUEs that you bring on board to upgrade your wastewater water treatment plant in the future. Well, when somebody comes to develop, they're asking for that size meter. They've shown the need, right? And they've shown the demand for your community plants, and they pay their way at the time of development. And you put that into an account, and you keep doing that. And then come the triggers, and TCEQ is going to make you expand your wastewater treatment plant. Well, you've got money that you can do it with, and then mixing that money. Yeah. Yeah, that's
City
good.
just is doing a wastewater treatment plant expansion study. So
Good.
yeah, we'll have the assumptions, LUE models.
Yeah.
And it's great because perfect at the time we're start kicking this off.
Right.
We'll have that kind of knowledge already available to model out different land use scenarios for the
And I
Mhm.
think that, that plan's going to let you now have an understanding of where you want to go. It's going to give you the opportunity to collect the fees that you need to collect. It's going to give you the opportunity to explain to people when they come in to develop where they need to put what, because somebody's going to come in, they're going to develop a piece of land and they're going to want to extend a wastewater line to connect to your system. And they're going to have an idea of where they want to go, which is going to be the shortest route for them, the cheapest route for them, the most efficient, economical, and convenient route for them. Because, and that's not knocking anybody, all of us want to do all of those things all the time. I want to do the thing that's going to work best and fastest for me. Now, the way you short circuit some of that conversation is you say, well, we've already got a plan for how these things need to go out there, right? And one, you're going to be communicating to them, this is what we need to partner with on. But two, you're going to be saving them some time because, again, they didn't have to come in and start figuring out what these routes were. They said, well, Smithville is looking for this route. And that'll pencil out if X, Y, and Z can work out. So good. Thanks for doing some of our work ahead of us and in the process, now preparing some of your network. Another thing it's going to do is it's going to give you the opportunity to preserve right-of-way corridors where you need them, when you need them through other development parts of the development process, right? This is going to give you a chance to know, well, I know I'm going to need a road here. And this property owner wants to do some things. I can start working with them now. Or this property came up for sale. And you know what? We just happen to have just enough money set aside that we don't need right now. We can go get that and we can secure that right-of-way corridor. And we have done that. We have gone out, and at the time when we purchased it, it was a lot of money. We purchased about 10 acres on Interloop on the south side of Georgetown because it came up for sale. The property owner from California was ready to be out, wasn't working for him. And we weren't going to use that land anytime soon. And there was a very, very discernible period where I wondered, did I recommend to my city council the right decision? I don't wonder that. And I haven't wondered that for a lot of years because we still haven't built the road on it. But the change in land prices that we've seen, maybe 5-6 times what we bought it for, I'm feeling pretty good about the decisions that we all made in the moment. And the reason we could do that is because we had a schematic, we had a plan, we saw the opportunity, certain things align. They don't always happen. A lot of times you'll have the plan and you'll say, if I could just find the money, and you won't, and the land will sell and you'll move on with your day. But if you're not prepared for that opportunity, you are certainly not going to be able to grasp at it. And so that's really what I'd say, you know, you get those things lined up now, you're ready when the conversations are occurring.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll say this and turn it over to you guys, but we've expanded our wastewater treatment plant. We're not done with construction of that expansion, and we're already kicking off into another 10 million gallons. And so we're under design of the next expansion. And if we have to do that again, it's not a whole lot of land out there left, right? So one good use of your funds is to purchase that land. You know, think of the future. Where do you need to go? Where are you going to need to extend out to? And if you get too much, you can still sell some off in the future, right? And it's just going to be more then. So yeah, don't be short-sighted. Don't let that land get away from you and develop and close you in. Got a question?
I haven't been to Round Rock in a while, but I've been to Georgetown, and I know Bastrop is already having this issue as well. But as far as downtown, as we are planning the use of our space, parking is always an issue. So what would y'all recommend in our downtown business areas to help curb that one?
So we are in the process of building a parking garage. If you go back to the downtown, you go to the north side of the square, you go a block up, you're going to see a giant hole in the ground. They dug that hole real fast, by the way. It was like kicked it off on a Monday and Wednesday. I drove by. They do good work. And I can't remember how many spaces. I'm sorry, but we're going to have I think it's a 3-story parking garage on the north side of downtown. Round Rock's had one forever. I used that, when I was in high school, and it was great. I'd say the not having parking, right? It can be hard for businesses. It can be hard for folks. It's worth looking at. Do you not have parking because there's no parking? Do you not have parking because things are misaligned? Or do you not have parking because an area is actually seeing activity, right? So analyze that and discern why you need it. Because sometimes, I mean, going to a community and saying spend a lot of money is easy for me because I'm just going to go back to my community and not have to bear the responsibility for that. But a parking garage is a big lift, and it took us, I think, a decade to really get to where we are now. But there's other things that you can do. You can look at where your parking is and how you structured your parking on the street and in parking lots. And there's lower hanging fruit that you can do. You can look at your pedestrian facilities and how can you analyze or how can you utilize parking that's further away. Like I walked here from Pockets, right? I walked here from Pockets, and to get across the road from Pockets, I mean, I could have done all kinds of crazy stuff, but really, I had to come all the way down to Main Street in order to cross over to get to here, right? And so there's potential opportunities to utilize parking infrastructure all that way, except for folks can't get to the north side or to the other side. And so those are now separated assets, your street parking, things like that. So you can take a look at those in the interim and see, well, what do we have that maybe we just haven't fully actualized?
Okay.
I was going
thank-
to add,
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, that what Tim was talking about, if you get a chance to go to downtown Round Rock and have a look, he took all those, where everybody just sort of parks parallel on the street, uh, on an unimproved street. And then now with this sidewalk program, it noses all the cars in. So you pick up all this efficiency. And so, yeah, it's made a big difference in downtown. And that's one way you could do it because a lot of it's right away.
Okay, thank y'all very much. Now we're gonna, for next 10 minutes, we want y'all to talk and do your still sticky notes, talk about land use, what you think about it. Where do you think we want to go? Jill's got ideas and suggestions for public and natural areas. Yes. Yes. And then there's another one up here. There's ideas and suggestions for residential land use. And then up here, also be thinking about why land use is important to you. So y'all can talk among yourselves and then,
analysis of the ETJ land use. So kind of give you a kickstart.
okay. Okay, so your clock is ticking. 10 more minutes. Okay, guys? Thanks.
All right.
Okay, y'all, time to, can I have your attention, please? Hello? Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we're ready for y'all. Thank you. There was the other one. The commercial use. Okay, as y'all are putting your sticky notes up on the pads of paper, on the sheets of paper, please take a few more minutes to start walking around and putting your dots. Jill, does Jill have the dots? Thank you. Are y'all listening? The sticky, your suggestions, what y'all think? You know, your ideas and suggestions that y'all want for the various things on commercial land use, residential land use. You can submit it. Yeah, one's for commercial, one's for residential, public areas. Okay, you're gonna have purple dots instead of red dots. Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention, please? Hello. All right, you only have about 2 minutes left to get your sticky dots up there. Okay. Y'all are about ready to wrap up tonight. I want to thank y'all for coming, but I want to ask our experts. Yeah. You're going to ask them to wrap up because in our next steps. Yeah. Sorry.
You know, because I remember.
Oh, where is it?
Exploded.
Good answer. All right, now that I have your attention, thank y'all very much for coming tonight. And I would like Travis and Leighton, if you would just kind of wrap up and where do you think we could kind of possibly go and your suggestions or point us in a direction, please.
I would say keep talking, right? I mean, this is the first of a long and ongoing discussion and bring more people into it. Hear people, you know, it's not easy for a community this size to change mentality to try to get to the place you need to be to receive the growth that is destined to come. But another thing is always keep the right mindset. When we were talking about land use, I hear the word use and not restrict, right? So people want to use their property, don't stop them from using their property. You know, give them positive ways, talk about things they can do and not just what they can't do. And then, yeah, just keep that positive mindset. And the expenses that are going to come, make sure they're broken down into understandable components so that people don't see this as just pricing people out of the community. This is paying our way to handle the growth that'll come. Otherwise, people will get priced out. So those are my thoughts.
I agree with everything that he said. You stay engaged, get other people engaged. The work that you're doing here now is setting up all of the work that you need to do to get the community that you want, to keep the community that you want, to achieve the things that you want to achieve. It's the foundation. And so all of the work that comes after it will only be as successful and effective as the work that you're doing here. So it's not the sort of thing that you want to rush through. You don't dawdle, you don't not accomplish, but don't let the concept of getting through to the next part or the part where you think the meat is, this is the meat. This is it right here. A couple of things that I thought about are you have to keep a concept of the timing that you're looking at. And so from a standpoint of the communities that I've worked in and lived in, you know, Georgetown's got a long history too. Georgetown was founded in 1848. And then nothing happened for 4 years. So we always say, hey, 1848, but the first plat, which is the city's not even filed for 4 more years. So somebody came through, they said, this is Georgetown, and then they rode away. And they lived in Bastrop, I think. And then from there, for the rest of that century, right? Georgetown grew, it did things, but it wasn't, it didn't just happen overnight. It wasn't a booming community. And it's gone through its different eras and its issues. In the 80s, it lost population. I was lucky enough I'm lucky enough to work in an organization that keeps people a long time, which means I was lucky enough to come into an organization where there was a long and deep history that people could share with me. And I worked with the building official that was there in 1991, and he was like, we did 1 building permit that year, right? And that was a town of about 20,000 people then. So 1 building permit, that was a scary time for them. And in 1995, Sun City came in. In 2002, Wolf Ranch Town Center. Over time, things have grown, but it was because of work people started doing around 1980 that it started really fruiting later on. And so just know that what you do now is impactful. We're working on our UDC. That's our development rules. Those development rules were adopted by our city council in 2003. So when I get out there, when I get in there and I look at the fingerprints of the people before, I'm looking a full generation back to see the work that I'm regulating land use with today. So it certainly needs to be updated, but also really impactful stuff.
Thank y'all very much. Wait, Willie, you have a question?
Yes, I think that one of the things that we don't want to overlook, Smithville has the only airport in Bastrop County. So I think the airport should be included in any development plan that we are thinking about. And sometimes we forget that.
It's happening on there. They're tracking, I don't know if you know this, but they're keeping tabs on pilots who fly in and then come downtown and hang around, be a tourist for a day.
Yeah, that's why.
And that, I
they
mean,
put the
it's
cars
a
out
funny
there
thing
for
to
them to
think
come in.
about. Okay. When I was in Port Aransas, I was the planning director there back in early 2000s, and most of the big property owners flew into town and hung out at our airport and knew each other. And then, so we started thinking about, okay, how do we make this a hub of tourism? So it's not everyone's coming across on the ferry. So- Oh, yeah, here.
I would love to have an actual like airport residential look like they have up in Lakeway, where those residents actually have their own runway and they also have their own hangars. And some of them are built into their homes, but I would think something similar to that would be neat if our airport is used as much as what it is. I know that whole community, y'all all like to get together, and I think that that would be an incentive for Smithville.
We have a model, our owner Judy Langford actually has an airport that her husband built, and they have hangars that they rent out, and they're looking to do the same thing. They live at the place, so it should help. I mean, it's not a weird way off thought to think about air travel as an alternative transportation means.
Yeah, and it would also be very nice to have a small restaurant there.
So think
Nope.
about the guys coming in for, not for the F1 races. They're gonna fly in, and if Smithville Airport can take jets, land small jets, you can start getting visibility that way. Like you said, the only airport in Bastrop County. So,
And
yep. Yeah, we're on the way. I mean, that's
5,000 more feet and add jet fuel. We don't have jet fuel there right now.
that's
Okay, thank y'all very much for coming tonight. I appreciate it. Hope y'all learned a lot. Thank y'all very much for coming tonight. Hope y'all have a safe drive back home. Please be careful. Thank you.